The auditorium fell silent as Thomas Mitchell stepped forward in his worn janitor's uniform, pushing his cleaning cart to the side. 500 graduating seniors, their families, and faculty members watched in confusion as the humble man who had mopped their floors for 3 years walked toward the stage. Principal Davidson had just called his name, but surely there had been some mistake. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Some parents covered their mouths in shock, others exchanged bewildered glances, and a few teenagers snickered behind their programs. But when Principal Davidson placed a genuine diploma in Thomas's weathered hands and announced that he had been attending night classes for the past 2 years, the entire auditorium erupted in something between gasps and applause. Thomas's eyes found his 8-year-old daughter Emma in the front row, her face glowing with pride that would make any father's heart soar. But to understand how this moment came to be, we have to go back to where it all started. 3 years earlier, Thomas Mitchell had been a different man entirely. He worked as a software engineer at a prestigious tech company downtown, drove a reliable sedan, and lived in a comfortable suburban home with his wife Sarah and their 5-year-old daughter Emma. Life had a predictable rhythm that felt secure and hopeful. Sarah would pack his lunch each morning with little notes tucked inside. Emma would practice her letters at the kitchen table while he reviewed code on his laptop, and evenings were filled with family dinners and bedtime stories. The future seemed bright and filled with endless possibilities for their little family. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything. Sarah's cancer appeared suddenly and aggressively, turning their stable world upside down in a matter of weeks. Thomas took leave from work to care for her, burning through their savings on treatments and experimental therapies. He held her hand through countless hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and sleepless nights when the pain was too much to bear. Emma, too young to fully understand what was happening, would curl up between them in the hospital bed, her small voice asking when Mommy would come home to read her favorite stories again. When Sarah passed away on a rainy Tuesday morning in November, Thomas felt like his heart had been ripped from his chest. The funeral expenses, combined with the medical bills they couldn't cover, left him drowning in debt. His former employer, understanding but bound by business needs, couldn't hold his position indefinitely. By the time he was ready to return to work, the tech industry had shifted, his skills had grown stale during his absence, and younger, more current programmers filled the available positions. Desperate to provide for Emma and keep a roof over their heads, Thomas took the first job he could find that offered steady hours and basic health insurance. Riverside High School needed a night janitor, and while the pay was a fraction of his former salary, it meant he could be home when Emma got off the school bus and work while she slept. The irony wasn't lost on him that he now mocked the floors of the same type of institution where he had once been preparing to send his daughter as a student. The first few months were brutal adjustments for both of them. Emma struggled to understand why Daddy now wore a uniform instead of his button-down shirts, why they had moved from their house to a small apartment, and why other kids sometimes whispered about her father being just the janitor when he picked her up from her new school. Thomas watched his bright, curious daughter become quieter and more withdrawn, and each night as he pushed his cart through empty hallways, he wondered if he was failing her in ways that went far deeper than financial security. It was during one of those late-night shifts, around 11:30 on a Thursday evening, that Thomas found himself in the main office, emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces. Principal Davidson was still there, grading papers under the fluorescent lights, her desk covered with student files and college application materials. She looked up as he knocked gently on the doorframe, asking if she needed anything before he finished cleaning her office. "Thomas, isn't it?" she asked, setting down her red pen and studying him with genuine interest. "You've been with us for about 6 months now, right?" He nodded, suddenly self-conscious about his rubber gloves and the smell of cleaning supplies that seemed to cling to his clothes no matter how much he washed them. Principal Davidson had always treated him with basic courtesy, but this felt different, more personal somehow. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but Emma Mitchell in Mrs. Rodriguez's 3rd-grade class, she's your daughter?" When he confirmed this, she continued, "Her teacher mentioned that she's exceptionally bright, particularly in mathematics and reading comprehension. She's testing well above grade level in several areas." Thomas felt a familiar mixture of pride and worry wash over him. Emma had always been quick to learn, just like her mother, but he worried constantly about whether he was providing enough intellectual stimulation and educational support on his janitor's salary. "She gets that from her mother," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of loss that still felt fresh even months later. Sarah was the smart one in our family. She would have known exactly how to nurture that potential. Principal Davidson leaned back in her chair, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What did you do before this job, Thomas?" The question caught him off guard. In the months since he'd started working at the school, no one had asked about his previous life. He was just the janitor, invisible and unremarkable, someone who appeared after hours to maintain the building while everyone else went home to their families and their dreams. "Software engineering," he admitted, feeling somehow embarrassed by the contrast between his past and present circumstances. "Worked for a company downtown for 8 years before my wife got sick." Principal Davidson's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained thoughtful rather than pitying. "That's quite a background. Have you ever considered going back to school? There are programs for adult learners, evening classes that work around schedules like yours." Thomas almost laughed at the suggestion, but something in her serious tone stopped him. "I barely have time to sleep between work and taking care of Emma. Plus, the tuition alone would be impossible on what I make here." "Actually," she said, pulling out a folder from her desk drawer, "there are grant programs specifically designed for single parents in situations like yours. The community college has partnerships with local businesses for job placement after graduation. It might be worth looking into, especially if you want to show Emma that circumstances don't define our potential." That conversation planted a seed that Thomas couldn't shake. Over the following weeks, as he went about his nightly routine of cleaning classrooms and hallways, he found himself thinking about Principal Davidson's suggestion. He noticed the motivational posters on classroom walls, the college banners hanging in the guidance counselor's office, and the pride on parents' faces during school events when their children received academic recognition. Emma deserved to see that same pride in her father's eyes when people talked about his accomplishments. She deserved to know that her daddy was more than just someone who cleaned up after other people's children. Most importantly, she deserved to understand that education and perseverance could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. One evening in late spring, Thomas made a decision that would change both their lives. After tucking Emma into bed and reading her favorite story about a princess who saved her kingdom through cleverness rather than magic, he sat down at their small kitchen table with the community college catalog that Principal Davidson had left in his cleaning cart. The pages were filled with degree programs, class schedules, and financial aid information that seemed almost too good to be true. The business administration program offered evening classes twice a week with the possibility of online coursework for some requirements. The estimated timeline was 2 years for an associate degree. Slightly raspy, calm yet confident narrator, fast-paced but emotional, minimal intonation, motivational storytelling style, with options to continue toward a bachelor's degree if his circumstances improved. Most importantly, there were grants and work-study programs that would cover the majority of his tuition and fees. The application process was daunting for someone who hadn't been a student in over a decade, but Thomas approached it with the same methodical determination that had once made him successful in his engineering career. He wrote essays about his goals and challenges, gathered transcripts from his original college degree, and filled out financial aid forms that laid bare the reality of their modest existence. When his acceptance letter arrived 3 weeks later, Thomas felt a surge of hope that he hadn't experienced since before Sarah's illness. He was going to be a student again, working toward a future that might offer Emma more opportunities and show her that setbacks could be overcome with persistence and courage. The first semester was harder than he had imagined. Thomas would finish his janitorial shift at 6 in the morning, go home to get Emma ready for school, catch a few hours of sleep while she was in class, pick her up in the afternoon, help her with homework, make dinner, and then head to his own classes at 7 in the evening. By the time he returned home around 10:30, he often had assignments to complete before starting his work shift again at midnight. Emma, now 7 years old and more aware of their situation, became his biggest supporter in ways that both broke and mended his heart. She would sit at the kitchen table doing her own homework while he studied, occasionally asking if she could help him with math problems that she found easier than he did. When he struggled with essay assignments, she would listen to him practice his arguments and offer suggestions with the innocent wisdom that only children possess. "Daddy," she said one evening as he wrestled with a particularly challenging economics paper, "you're getting really good at school stuff. Maybe someday you can be the principal instead of the janitor, and then you could make the rules about everything." Her faith in his potential was both inspiring and terrifying. Thomas realized that he wasn't just pursuing an education for the practical benefits of better employment prospects. He was trying to become the kind of father Emma deserved, someone she could talk about with pride instead of embarrassment. The other students in his classes were a diverse mix of ages and backgrounds, but Thomas often felt like an outsider among people who didn't have to worry about childcare arrangements or getting enough sleep to function at a physical job. Some were recent high school graduates with their whole lives ahead of them. Others were career changers with stable support systems. Few understood the complexity of juggling single parenthood, full-time employment, and academic demands. There were nights when Thomas questioned whether he was being selfish or unrealistic. Emma would fall asleep at the kitchen table while he studied, and he would carry her to bed feeling guilty about the time and attention that his coursework took away from her. The exhaustion was constant, and there were moments when he wondered if he was failing at everything instead of succeeding at anything. But then Emma would bring home a perfect spelling test or solve a math problem that impressed her teacher, and Thomas would remember why he was pushing himself so hard. She was watching his every move, learning lessons about perseverance and self-worth that would shape her for the rest of her life. He couldn't let her grow up believing that circumstances were permanent or that dreams were luxuries for other people's families. By his second semester, Thomas had found his rhythm and was earning grades that surprised even him. His professors began to recognize his contributions to class discussions drawn from real-world experiences that many of his younger classmates lacked. His essay on workplace efficiency earned praise for its practical insights, and his presentation on small business management drew from observations he'd made during his years in corporate environments. Word of his academic success began to spread among the faculty at Riverside High School. Teachers who had barely noticed him during his cleaning rounds started acknowledging him with genuine interest. Some asked about his classes, others offered encouragement, and a few shared their own stories of pursuing education later in life. Principal Davidson made a point of checking in with him periodically, asking about his progress and offering support when scheduling conflicts arose between his work duties and class requirements. She arranged for his shift to start slightly later on the nights when he had major exams. And she made sure that other custodial staff could cover for him during particularly demanding academic periods. "Thomas," she said one afternoon as he was preparing for final exams during his second year, "I want you to know that watching your dedication to your education while maintaining your responsibilities here has been truly inspiring. You're setting an incredible example for our students, whether they realize it or not." Her words meant more to him than she could possibly know. For 2 years, Thomas had felt invisible in the academic world, a janitor trying to better himself while surrounded by people who saw education as a right rather than a privilege. Knowing that someone in a position of authority recognized his efforts validated the sacrifices he'd been making for Emma's future. The final semester brought new challenges as Thomas began preparing for graduation and job searching. His grades qualified him for the dean's list, and several professors had written recommendation letters that highlighted his work ethic and unique perspective. He'd completed internships with local businesses that were impressed by his maturity and problem-solving abilities. Emma, now 8 years old and in 3rd grade, had grown into a confident, articulate child who spoke proudly about her daddy being in college. She'd started telling her classmates that her father was going to graduate soon, and she'd been asking for weeks whether she would be able to watch him walk across the stage to receive his diploma. The graduation ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday morning in May, during the same weekend as Riverside High School's own graduation celebration. Thomas had arranged for time off from his janitorial duties, and Emma had picked out a special dress for the occasion. Everything seemed perfect until the Friday afternoon when disaster struck. Thomas received a call from the community college registrar's office informing him that there had been an administrative error with his transcript evaluation. Due to a change in degree requirements that had been implemented during his enrollment, he was 3 credit hours short of graduation. The missing credits could be completed during the summer session, but he would not be able to participate in the ceremony with his original class. The news felt like a crushing blow after 2 years of sacrifice and hard work. Thomas had been looking forward to that moment when Emma could watch him achieve something significant, a tangible symbol that their struggles had been worthwhile. Now he would have to explain to his 8-year-old daughter that despite all his efforts, he wouldn't be graduating when he'd promised. Emma took the news with surprising maturity, but Thomas could see the disappointment in her eyes that she tried so hard to hide. That evening, as he helped her with her homework and prepared for another night of janitorial work, he felt the weight of failure settling over him like a familiar darkness. It was during his shift that night, as he cleaned the main hallway near the principal's office, that Thomas encountered Principal Davidson working late once again. She looked up from her paperwork as he knocked on her doorframe and immediately noticed the dejection in his expression. "Thomas, you look like you've had bad news. Is everything all right?" He explained the situation with the graduation requirements, trying to keep his voice steady as he described Emma's disappointment and his own sense of having let her down. Principal Davidson listened with the same attentive concern she'd shown 2 years earlier when she'd first suggested he consider returning to school. "Thomas," she said when he finished talking, "I have an idea that might sound unusual, but I think it could be meaningful for both you and Emma." She explained that Riverside High School's graduation ceremony always included recognition for faculty and staff who had achieved significant milestones during the academic year. Teachers who earned advanced degrees were acknowledged, support staff who completed professional development were honored, and community members who had made special contributions to the school were celebrated. "What you've accomplished while working here full-time and raising Emma is extraordinary," she continued. "You've shown our students and their families what dedication and perseverance look like in real life. I'd like to include you in our graduation ceremony, recognizing your achievement in front of our entire school community." Thomas was stunned by the offer. The idea of walking across the stage at Riverside High School, where he'd spent 2 years as the invisible janitor, seemed both terrifying and incredibly meaningful. Emma would be able to see him recognized for his accomplishments in front of hundreds of people who had only ever known him as the man who cleaned their children's classrooms. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I never expected anything like this." "Say yes," Principal Davidson replied with a smile. "You've earned this recognition, and Emma deserves to see her father celebrated for his achievements." The weeks leading up to graduation were a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Principal Davidson had arranged for Thomas to receive his community college diploma during the high school ceremony, acknowledging his completion of the degree requirements despite the administrative delay. The local newspaper ran a feature story about his journey from software engineer to janitor to college graduate, highlighting the challenges of single parenthood and adult education. Emma was beside herself with excitement. Slightly raspy, calm yet confident that her daddy was going to be honored at the big graduation ceremony. She practiced walking in her special dress and helped Thomas choose a tie that would look good with his graduation cap and gown. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect weather that made everything feel possible. Thomas stood in the faculty staging area, wearing his cap and gown over his best shirt and tie, surrounded by teachers and administrators who had become genuine supporters of his journey. Emma sat in the front row with Mrs. Rodriguez, her third-grade teacher, who had volunteered to accompany her to the ceremony. Her face was glowing with anticipation, and she waved enthusiastically when she spotted Thomas among the other honorees on stage. As the ceremony progressed through the traditional elements of graduation, student speakers and award presentations, Thomas felt his nervousness building. When Principal Davidson stepped to the microphone to introduce the special recognition segment, the auditorium settled into attentive silence. "Today, we celebrate not only our graduating seniors," she began, "but also members of our school community who have demonstrated exceptional dedication to learning and personal growth. Education is not limited by age, circumstances, or job titles. It's about the commitment to better ourselves and set positive examples for the next generation." She went on to describe Thomas's journey, from his background in software engineering through the challenges of single parenthood and career change to his successful completion of his business degree while working full-time as a custodian. The auditorium was completely quiet as she spoke, with hundreds of people hearing his story for the first time. Thomas Mitchell has shown our students, our families, and our entire community what it means to persevere in the face of adversity. Principal Davidson continued, "He has proven that circumstances do not define our potential, and that the love of a parent can fuel incredible achievements." When she called Thomas's name and asked him to come forward to receive his diploma, the auditorium erupted in applause. Students who had barely noticed him during his cleaning rounds were on their feet cheering. Parents were wiping away tears, and faculty members were beaming with pride for their colleagues' accomplishment. Thomas walked across the stage with his head held high, no longer the invisible janitor, but a college graduate, a dedicated father, and a symbol of possibility for everyone watching. When Principal Davidson placed the diploma in his hands, he looked out at the sea of faces and found Emma in the front row, her expression pure joy and pride. "This is for every parent who wonders if their sacrifices matter," Thomas said into the microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "This is for every child who needs to see that dreams are worth pursuing, no matter how long they take to achieve. And this is for my daughter Emma, who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." The standing ovation that followed seemed to last forever, with people cheering not just for Thomas's academic achievement, but for the hope his story represented. In that moment, surrounded by the support of a community that had watched him transform from a broken man into someone worth celebrating, Thomas understood that his journey had been about much more than earning a degree. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and congratulations, Emma ran to her father and threw her arms around his waist. "Daddy, I'm so proud of you," she whispered against his graduation gown. "You're the best student in the whole world." Thomas knelt down to her level, his eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "Emma, I couldn't have done any of this without you cheering me on. You made me want to be better, to show you that anything is possible if you work hard enough and never give up." As they stood together in their finest clothes, surrounded by well-wishers and photographers capturing the moment, Thomas realized that their story was just beginning. The diploma in his hands represented not an ending, but a new chapter filled with possibilities he could barely imagine. Principal Davidson approached them as the crowd began to thin, her smile warm with satisfaction at seeing her plan come to fruition. "Thomas, I have something else to tell you. The district office has been following your story, and they have a position opening in their facilities management department. It's administrative work, using your business degree, with a salary that would allow you to move out of the custodial role if you're interested." Thomas felt his heart skip a beat at the unexpected opportunity, a chance to use his education in a meaningful way. To provide better stability for Emma and to continue growing professionally seemed almost too good to be true. "I don't know what to say," he replied, echoing his words from weeks earlier when she'd first proposed including him in the graduation ceremony. "This feels like a dream." "Say yes," Emma piped up, grinning up at both adults. "Say yes, Daddy, you can do anything now." And as Thomas looked at his daughter, so full of confidence in his abilities and pride in his achievements, he realized she was absolutely right. The man who had walked into Riverside High School 3 years ago as a desperate single father looking for any job to support his child had become someone entirely different. He was still a father, still dedicated to Emma above everything else. But now he was also a college graduate, a community inspiration, and someone with a future full of possibilities. The journey from software engineer to janitor had seemed like a devastating fall from grace. The path from janitor to college graduate felt like a redemption that validated every sacrifice and sleepless night. But the real transformation had been deeper than career changes or educational achievements. Thomas had rediscovered his own worth and shown his daughter that resilience, determination, and love could overcome any obstacle. Tell us in the comments if you've ever had to start over in life and what kept you motivated during the hardest times. As Thomas and Emma walked out of the auditorium hand in hand, their future stretching ahead like an open road, they knew that this graduation was not the end of their story, but the beginning of all the amazing chapters yet to be written. Family is not just about the circumstances you're born into, but about the love and support you choose to give each other every single day. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and click on the video on the screen to watch the next one with a twist so powerful you'll never forget it.